We're going to start today with died suddenly. What does that mean? Someone died suddenly has become the new code for the COVID vaccine is killing people. Now, this has all come to an extremely stupid crescendo because of what happened with the collapse and cardiac arrest of NFL football player Damar Hamlin on the field during an NFL game a little over a week ago. And as you know, if you've been watching this program, because we've been following it, I even got some voicemails about it that I played for you. The gist of the story is that Damar Hamlin collapsed not because he got hit in a particular way, but because of the COVID vaccine. The COVID vaccine, which, by the way, nobody knew whether Damar Hamlin had actually received at the time that people started saying the vaccine is to blame. And this brings us to a bigger story that has been building. The died suddenly conspiracy theory is the idea that people who have received the COVID-19 vaccine are either dying at an unusual rate. The story is always otherwise healthy people are suddenly dying for unexplained reasons. That's one piece of it. Or experiencing health effects of different kinds. Now, there is a lot that we could say about this and so many different things. There's even a film called Died Suddenly, which rehashes a lot of these same debunked claims. But a lot of this has to do with some really basic logical fallacies that I hope I've done an okay job of educating people about over the years on the show. And it also has to do with something called the base rate bias. So there's really two things going on here. First of all, it's a fundamental issue of correlation versus causation. We sometimes call this post hoc ergo propter hoc, meaning it happened afterwards, therefore it happened because of. Or to put it another way, B happened after A, therefore A must have caused B. And when you zoom out, you very quickly see how faulty this sort of thinking is. So let's start tight and then we'll zoom out. Let's start with Damar Hamlin. Are there examples of cardiac arrest during sporting events among athletes? Yeah, there are. In major sports, Detroit Lion Chuck Hughes had a fatal heart attack on the field in 1971. That's the only NFL player to die while playing. Danish soccer player Christian Eriksen suffered cardiac arrest during a tournament in 2021. Hockey Hall of Famer Chris Pronger's heart stopped when he was hit in the chest by a hockey puck. NHL player Jay Bouwmeester, I'm not exactly sure on the pronunciation, collapsed on the bench after a cardiac episode. Marc-Vivien Foé died during a 2003 semifinal match from an undiagnosed heart condition. That was a soccer death. All of these have not been claimed to have anything to do with vaccines. Most of them predate the COVID vaccines. So the Damar Hamlin situation is not unique, but that's not really the big story. The big story is you have to understand base rates. When you test a vaccine, as was done by Pfizer and Moderna before the COVID vaccines were fully released to the public, a lot of these studies, clinical trials, had 40,000 adults, for example, 40,000 adults. And so someone who wants to think critically about this issue, rather than fearmonger or spread conspiracy theories, would say, if you have a group of adults, if you take 18 plus 40,000 people distributed among ages, how many of them would you expect to die over a 3-month period, aside from whether you're testing anything? And what I mean by that is, if you take a group of 40,000 people and you just follow them for 3 months, you would expect some to die if their ages are normally distributed. And it's a tough question to answer exactly for a vaccine test group because it could depend on particular choices that are made for who's included or who's not included. But there's something called the crude death rate. That's the number of deaths per 1,000 people a year. Overall, in the US, the crude death rate is 7.8, meaning over the course of a year, you would expect 7.8 deaths per 100 people per 1,000 people for all different causes. Now, if we use that rate, we would estimate that over a 3-month period, you would expect between 5 and 6 deaths per 100 people. These are rough numbers. So if you've got a group of 40,000 people, you would expect to see about 235 of them die over a 3-month period. This is aside from testing anything, but that's just an estimate. And the other thing that's important to consider is that that number that I gave you, 7.8, that's not just adults, that's everybody. That includes younger people. The death rate for 18 plus, again, aside from testing a vaccine, would be higher than the death rate for the entire population because the risk of death increases with age. And when you do only 18 plus, you would have a higher expected death rate than for people of all ages, all the way down to newborn. So it's an estimate. The number of people you would expect to die in a group of 40,000 would vary. But the point of it is, the fact that people died in the 3 months after getting a vaccine doesn't actually tell us anything. People die. And in a group of 40,000, people will die. So then we get to this particular died suddenly conspiracy theory. Here, they want to talk about young people are dying. Healthy young people are dying. Now, first of all, when we say healthy, in many cases, we don't actually know the full history. And what we mean by healthy can vary in a lot of different ways. So that is fallacious and lacks evidence at the top of the discussion. But here's the really important thing. The crude death rate for those aged 18 to 34 is about 3.3 deaths per 1,000 people per year. That's just the average crude death rate. In the United States, the CDC believes about 65% of those aged 18 to 24 got a full regimen of the COVID vaccine. That means the 2 initial doses. Forget about boosters, that's not part of the data. But 65% of those 18 to 24 got the 2 doses. That means if we have about 32 million people aged 18 to 24, 65% of them are vaccinated, meaning 21 million people aged 18 to 24 received the full dose of vaccines. If you look at that crude death rate and you look at the number of people who have gotten vaccinated, you would expect 70,000 deaths among that group over the course of a year. Now, you will have endless circumstances. You will have motor vehicle accidents. You will have cardiac episodes. You will have cancer. You will have COVID-19 in some of them. You will have all those different things. The fact that some people aged 18 to 24 died in the period after which they got a vaccine tells you nothing. 5 stories, 10 stories, 20 stories about a 21-year-old who died 7 months after getting a vaccine. And we don't exactly know the circumstances, or we vaguely know, but it's a privacy issue. It doesn't tell us anything about the safety of vaccines. And what is missing from this analysis in most cases is this issue of the base rates. What are the base rates of death in all of these different categories? It's basic stats, it's basic research methods, and it's basic common sense and logic. And that is not a surprise then that it is completely missing from the minds and the discussions of these conspiracy theorists. So don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. Understand these concepts, causation, correlation, base rates, critical stuff.